truth is, the ego is not bad. In fact, the ego is very much needed so that we can properly interact in this three-dimensional reality. Diba? If you don't have an ego, then you cannot interact with others. However, we need the ego to be guided with our higher self, because the ego kasi is the false representation of ourselves. So we need a higher guidance for the ego to function properly into this world. Kasi kung ang ego walang guidance coming from the higher self, it will just act like an animal. It will just move according to its instincts. But if we tap into our higher consciousness or to the higher self, to this divine light that is within us, then we will be properly guided. Hello everyone, Namaste. My name is DM Joseph and welcome to the Corporate Mystic. Now today, pag-uusapan natin what is higher self channeling. But before that, intro. Bago tayo magsimula, first we need to understand what is the higher self, what is the lower self or the ego, and what is the mind. First of all, all of us, we all have this higher self and lower self. So what is the lower self or the ego? The lower self or the ego is actually a thought generated by our minds about ourself. When we say I am, we are actually referring to the ego or the false self. This ego kasi, this is the aspect of us that has a history, that has a name, it has a likes and dislikes and everything, But this is a thought generated by our mind. And what is the mind? The mind is being debated by so many philosophers, scientists, and scholars. Does the mind come from the brain, or is the brain just a receiver of the mind? Well, the ancient sages or the rishis, yung mga ancient mystics sa India, they perceive mind as a room, right? So the mind is a room where everything is happening. For example, right here, right now, you are watching this video. I am talking to you. So your cognition, perhaps if you see something, you see the image, for example, of a rose, or you listen to a music, or you listen to my voice. Those interactions that are felt by your five senses, it then appears within your mind. And your ego, the I am, the false self, the lower self, then interprets your experience. You say, I saw a rose, or I heard his voice, right? But have you experienced something very profound? Let's just say, for example, you are listening to your favorite music, and then suddenly you are so immense, you are so, let's say, captivated by the experience of listening to your favorite music, whereby you felt lost in that specific moment. Have you experienced that? Or perhaps you are doing art, you are dancing, you are singing, and you have felt that you are lost in the moment. Have you felt that? Yes, right? Because your mind perceives the image or the music or anything that you are doing, and then you are so immense, you are being at one with that specific activity that you are doing, and then you felt lost. Now, what is lost in that specific moment? What is lost is actually your ego. Temporarily, the I thought, the false self, was being lost in that specific moment. And what remains is what? The mind is there. However, what has the experience? It is actually our higher self or our awareness, the light of consciousness that is pure truth. It is absolute, it is reality, and It doesn't change. It is not affected by your ego or your mind. Now, the ancient sages describe the higher self like the sun. No? Para itong araw, it doesn't change, it doesn't get affected by anything because it is absolute, it is the truth, it is pure wisdom, it is pure knowledge. So, earlier, no, we described the lower self as the ego, a thought generated by the mind, and the mind is like a room where everything is happening there. Your emotions, your cognitions, your reactions, everything is just flowing there. It appears and it disappears. But the higher self doesn't get affected with anything of this because the higher self is like a sun that gives light to that room. It is the eternal sunshine. It is the light of truth within the darkness of our minds. So when we say I saw the flower, we say I because that refers to the ego that has the experience, or let's say for example tries to interpret the experience. However, when we get lost in the moment because of a certain music or a certain activity that we are doing, the ego temporarily disappears, and what remains is the awareness, the light of truth within that room, and that is our higher self, and that has the experience of the activity. For example, you saw a rose, you heard your favorite music, and you become one with that experience. The ego disappears, and then what remains is the awareness. Now, since this awareness, this light of truth that is within us, our higher self, doesn't move, doesn't change, it remains as it is because it is the absolute reality and it is the light of God that is within us. Now, the question is there a way that we could access, we could tap into this light of ultimate truth to guide our lives? Well, the answer is yes. In this three-dimensional reality, in this world, our ego is needed for survival. However, we need a higher form of, let's say, instinct that is not given by the ego, and this instinct is called intuition, and it is the guidance coming from this higher self within us. Truth is, the ego is not bad. In fact, the ego is very much needed so that we can properly interact in this three-dimensional reality. Diba? If you don't have an ego, then you cannot interact with others. However, we need the ego to be guided with our higher self because the ego kasi is the false representation of ourselves. So we need a higher guidance for the ego to function properly into this world. Kasi kung ang ego walang guidance coming from the higher self, it will just act like an animal. It will just move according to its instincts. But if we tap into our higher consciousness or to the higher self, to this divine light that is within us, then we will be properly guided. So the question is, how are we going to tap into our higher self? Well, there are so many ways on how to tap into our higher self or to our higher consciousness. However, the key there is to be able to access go beyond our mind so that we will be able to access the higher intuition, the higher guidance coming from our higher self. Now, let's discuss the mind. The mind actually has three major parts. We have the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the superconscious mind. The conscious mind is this normal waking mind. Ito yung mind na ginagamit natin when we think, when we talk, when we act. This mind that I am using right now, this is the conscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind is the mind that is controlling all our involuntary movements. For example, the functioning of our heart, the functioning of our brains, the functioning of our organs. Diba? You don't control your kidneys, you don't control your heart. It is the subconscious mind, not the conscious mind, that controls it. However, the subconscious mind also acts as a bridge to the superconscious mind. Now, what is the superconscious mind? The superconscious mind is the thin line that separates the higher self, the light of eternal truth within us, going to our very own mind. So the superconscious mind, if we could tap this is where we could tap our intuition. This is where we could tap other psychics. This is where they tap clairvoyance. Others tap this to see the future, while others tap this, you and me can tap this in order to get messages coming from our higher self, in order for our lives to be guided accordingly. Now, how do we access this? We could access this through meditation or through dreams. So, ganito kasi yan. Our superconscious mind kasi, this is only accessible when we are in a deep state of, let's say, meditation, when our brains are on a certain frequency that is attuned to our higher self. For example, in your normal waking hours, you do not have access to the superconscious mind. Ganito lang, nag-uusap tayo. But when you start to, let's say, meditate, you start accessing your subconscious mind, because your conscious mind, it has a filter kasi that goes to the subconscious mind. So that filter slowly disappears when you are in meditation or when you are sleepy. 30 minutes to 1 hour before you go to sleep, or even 30 minutes to 1 hour after you wake up, because on that time, our brains, kasi we are still on a meditative state, we are able to tap them when we are in that states of consciousness. So, normal waking hours, eto, conscious mind. When you are sleepy, you're starting to access your subconscious mind. And that moment, that second before you go to sleep, that yung isang segundo na lang makakatulog ka na, that is where the superconscious mind is accessible. And when you sleep, the superconscious mind is active. So sometimes we access our higher selves through our dreams. So every night kasi we have like 5 to 10 dreams. However, we only remember a few, or perhaps we really don't remember anything at all. So what we need to do is, first, we need to really have an affirmation that when I go to sleep tonight, I will be able to remember my dreams. And it takes a lot of practice to really have access to that. And before we go to sleep, we need to have a clear intention of what do we want to get, what messages do we want to hear coming from our higher self. Sometimes in dreams kasi it appears as imagery, it appears as codes, parang it appears as a snake, perhaps snake. If you try to interpret that according to some modern psychologist study, it means, let's say, betrayal, or it could mean anything else. So sometimes hindi siya vivid, but also if you are really attuned to your higher self, sometimes it becomes clearer, and that's what we call lucid dreaming, whereby clear talaga yung mga mensahe. Sometimes you see words, you see an event, you even sometimes see future events, or sometimes you see past events that maybe you need to learn lessons from those past events. That's why your higher consciousness, your higher self is showing that to you. Or sometimes then you will be seeing visions of someone, let's say a person, perhaps a family member, a friend who died already, talking to you, or perhaps images of saints. Could be even the image of our Lord and Master Jesus, Siddhartha Gautama, even angels, or sometimes even dark entities that are giving you wisdom. Alright? So that's for the dream part. And what we need to do is we need to have a journal. We need to have a notebook that we will be able to write all our visions. Every time we go to sleep, when we have a dream, we need to keep a record of it, because it will come in handy, because who knows, that might be a message coming from the higher self, coming from the divine to you. Now, here's also a practice that I do frequently. This is accessing the higher self through meditation. At sinabi ko nga kanina, di ba? Our connection or access to our higher self is much stronger 30 minutes to 1 hour after we wake up, or 30 minutes to 1 hour before we go to sleep. So ako, I do my practice after I wake up, before I go to sleep. I do meditation. Even a simple meditation as just focusing on your breathing, just relaxing, is very, very effective. So for a more in-depth tutorial on meditation through breathing, I will share a link after this video, because I made a different video on that, on how to meditate focusing on breathing. So when I wake up, of course, diba, parang clear pa yung mind mo. So you can actually access the higher self even if you don't have any specific intention at the moment. You just meditate, breathe in, breathe out, just focus on your breathing. Do not mind the noise, do not mind anything. just focus on your breathing. And after that, when you open your eyes, grab your notebook and your pen, and start writing whatever inspiration that comes into your mind. That is if you don't have any specific intention. But if you have a specific intention, for example, you are experiencing a great challenge in your life right now, or maybe you have questions that you want to have answers, then before you meditate, make sure that you set your intentions clear, and then you meditate. And after your meditation, open your eyes, and then slowly grab your notebook and write. Or perhaps if you don't have a notebook, you can actually have a journal that is perhaps digital, perhaps your cell phone or your tablet or your laptop, computer, whatever. Just write, right? Because it may come into a form of intuitive writing, creative writing. Sometimes it goes there. Okay, so in the end, no, accessing our higher self for guidance is very, very helpful. And if everyone only knows how to do this, if only everyone knows that we have a higher self, then maybe 90% of the problems of the world will be solved, because we are guided inside. We are guided by the higher light of consciousness, by the higher light of God that is within us all. Diba? Kaya nga, we always say namaste, because I honor that divine light in you, which is also the divine light in me. And this light will be guiding us through our lives, because this is the light of God. This is the light of creation, and it is the light where we all came from. I hope you've learned something new today. And if this is your first time watching my videos, all right, please click like and subscribe, and also ring the notification bell, so that next time when I upload a video like this, you will be one of the first few who will be able to see it. All right, so salamat sa lahat, and namaste.